Hey, Katherine VanHoose. We're here at the University of Amsterdam today, and I want to talk about your favorite topic, which is street experiments.
Street experiments.
Street experiments.
Yeah.
So you want to tell me a bit about what you've been working on, experiments as part of your PhD, and how you're finding that so far in the context of Amsterdam.
Okay, so a big question to start off with. But thanks, George, for having me today. Yeah, street experiments. So we call them city street experiments. So I guess that's always the first thing to make sure we're talking about streets in an urban context.
City
street experiments. Yeah, yeah, but that's a lot of words, so you can just say street experiments. That's fine. But yeah, like you said, I'm doing my PhD research. I'm in my last few months, actually. So I can say now we had a lot of questions in the beginning. We still have a lot of questions, but we also have some answers. So that's always a nice update for someone who's doing research on these things.
So depending on how fast I get this edited, you might be doctor by the time this gets released.
Yeah, well, you're pretty quick, right? No, but I think we've got a few more months to collect everything. But yeah, basically, been working on this topic now for 4 years in total. And like you said, I can't say something about Amsterdam, but we're actually in a European project, so with 5 other cities, among which London, Ghent, Munich, Milan, and Munich. And we do research in each one of those cities, and we work with other partners at universities, but also people from practice. So it's we always have like one foot in the university and one foot on the ground, I like to say, which is nice because you stay in touch with what's actually happening. And street experiments are something that is actually happening right now all around us. They're becoming very popular. They're increasingly being used as a tool by local governments, mostly to kind of figure out how are we going to kind of unpack and solve these problems that we're running into in terms of urban mobility, but also in terms of space. So that's kind of the scene that we're working in. And do you want me to talk about Amsterdam now, or?
Actually, I was wondering about Extra, which is this project that you've just described. And it occurred to me that I don't know what the acronym means, because all these projects have, you're encouraged when you submit these big project proposals to have a flashy acronym. So I don't know what it means. Do you know what it means?
I do know what it means,
okay.
Yeah. So EXTRA stands for Experimenting with City Streets to Transform Urban Mobility. Yeah. But actually, it's the title is exactly what we're doing, so that's nice. It actually matches the actual research topic. Yeah, so that's the project that we're in.
Cool, and that's you from the research professional side. I was wondering, you as Katherine VanHoose from more of a personal side. So you are not Dutch. You speak perfect Midwest American English. Is it Midwest? And you're from Kentucky. So I'm wondering, what brought you over to Europe and to live in Amsterdam?
Over here? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
It's a good one, huh?
That's a good one, yeah. So you're right. I'm from Kentucky originally. Some people say I sound like I'm a Dutch person, but...
Is that part of the Midwest? Did I get it right?
Yeah, I think technically you could say... Okay. Well, yeah. Culturally, we're a little bit southern. We say y'all, stuff like
y'all.
That. Yeah, so that's but geographically speaking, we're kind of in the Midwest. But yeah, I finished my bachelor's, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to continue with architecture. I studied architecture, but I knew that I wanted to do a master's. And one way or another, I got in touch with a guy here who worked for the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment, and he asked me if I wanted to do an internship for them. And it was the plan was to stay for 10 months. And to do that, I've been here for 11 years now, so every year I kept finding a new reason to stay. And now I can say, yeah, this is home. I mean, Kentucky is my first home, but this has definitely become, my current home.
I asked the question because I think it's very relevant in terms of street experiments. just being able to see the differences in how transport planning, urban planning, street design are done, especially
Mm.
in North America, and the differences between the American way
Yeah.
and most
It's
places around the world.
yeah. Yeah.
So did you get into this topic as a way to escape from perhaps the the urban design that you found yourself
Mm.
in Kentucky, or what was the motivation, eh?
Yeah, it's funny that you said that. I think um, I didn't even realize that I was living in such a such a car dominated place and a car dominated lifestyle because that's just what you grow up with and what you know. I mean, when you're 16, you get your driver's license.
Did you get your driver's
Of
license?
course, yeah.
Hey, high
That's
five. Me too.
but that's the only way. That's the only way to get around. I
Yeah.
mean, that's or your mom has to take you everywhere. But yeah, like where I'm from, we don't really have sidewalks, like, or the sidewalk just randomly ends somewhere, and it's a small town, of course. But yeah, if you go to a bigger city, even in New York or places like that, like it's also they're just now starting to do it the way that we do it over here.
Hmm.
So I think once you step out of that, and I spend some time here, and this world like opens up to you, like, whoa, I can walk places, I can ride my bike places. That's such a different way of living and experiencing daily life, and then you go back there for Christmas or to visit your family, and then you realize like, oh, this is so bad actually, like this is really not a nice way to live. So yeah, if I look at it now, and I've actually, you really get used to that way of doing things. So I was telling someone this morning about, there's this one stretch of, I live in Amersfoort, by the way, so I live in a kind of smaller town, not in Amsterdam, but same Dutch context. So it's lots of cycling paths everywhere. And there's this one stretch of road. For some reason, there's no cycling path on it. And it's really strange because at some point it is there and then it just ends and then it picks up again a little bit later on. But the cars there suddenly start acting very differently. They speed up. They forget that you're a person on a bicycle. They come very close to you. It's not nice at all. And if there was a line there saying this is the cycling path and this is the road, then they suddenly act differently. But even then, I can get so irritated with that small piece of road. And I think, this has to be better. This is terrible. But actually, if you look at the grand scheme of things, we live in a really nicely planned and well done environment in terms of urban mobility.
Did you know that you were going to uh, explore this topic of street experiments, urban design when you got into the internship? Was that the
No, no, no,
intent to
no.
go down this road?
No, that was actually about how you can better use polders in the Netherlands, like in terms of tourism and like that farmers start to have other types of what do you call that? Like ways to earn money on the side next to their farming business. So that was
Ah,
totally different. That was
wow.
really, yeah. Actually, urban mobility, I don't know, it just kind of popped up. You kind of stay in this urban studies area, and then you can go into other topics, which is really nice about the masters here because
Mhm.
it's very open, and then you're not kind of made to do one thing afterwards. So yeah.
Wow.
So no, I wouldn't say I'm not like I don't didn't do anything with transport before this, but yeah, after 4 years, then you kind of it becomes your topic.
So the street experiments projects that we
Hmm.
mentioned before, there's extra. There was what was the other one? Uh,
Clear.
Clear.
Hmm.
Also don't know. Do you know the acronym?
Yeah, I had to ask someone with it what it stood for the other day because I forgot.
Uh-huh.
City livability by redesign. Cle- Yeah.
CLEAR. Yeah. That project,
Hmm.
and then set street experiments tools.
Yeah.
So these three projects have created quite the consortium of people, uh, many of whom are repeat participants, right?
Mm.
And you've been to Munich as part of the extra project, but also we put on some other events there while you were there in September of 2023 that involved the summer school, uh, remaking the street. Summer
Hmm.
school is sponsored by EIT Urban Mobility together with Humankind and TUM, and we put together this street festival that involved some academic talks, but in the neighborhood, and that was very interesting for me to repurposed the street into a stage. We rode over with a cargo bike, and what started with one mini block turned into 10 different parklets, and then we added a stage, and it became a whole street party. So the other day, I was looking on Google Street View for some reason, and I tried to find the street that we put all the parklets on, right? And I couldn't find it because I was trying to show it to a colleague of ours because I didn't recognize it without the parklets. I was looking for the parklets. It became, while I was there, that it
What you
became
got
that,
used to,
right?
yeah.
It's a part that I remembered. So, so you were in a similar situation here in Amsterdam, where you were here when the city of Amsterdam did a similar street experiment on Wiebelstraat, which is quite close to the university here. So, how often did you get to witness what was happening there over the period of 6 weeks, and what was it like seeing it like go away after a month, more than a month of greenery?
Yeah, so that was for Amsterdam. That was a really big street experiment. They call it a pilot. We can have a long discussion about the difference between a pilot and an experiment. But yeah, it was temporary. It was there for 6 weeks, like you said. And for people that don't know, that's a very big street, actually really a thoroughfare through the city, connecting the ring to really the inner city of Amsterdam. 2 lanes on both sides. There's a cycling path and there's sidewalks as well. And in the middle, one of these cute little asphalt things to kind of separate everything. But very car dominated, very busy, lots of traffic during the day. But also a lot of people that live here, work here, and need to cross the street. So when that was gone, the cars weren't gone completely. So they took out 1 lane on each side, and then they lowered the speed limit, and then they put on one part a lot of big flower pots to kind of show, hey, this is different now. And in the middle, there was kind of wasn't a parklet, because a parklet would be using parking spaces to turn into a park, but it was really in the middle. Just a little piece of green with some picnic benches, and around it were some nice green. What do you call those things?
There was a wide street with a median in the middle.
Yes,
That's
and that's
right.
what they turned into. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but then
And
they put some kind of like green, like what do you call that?
What do you
Around the edge.
planters?
I mean, yeah, but then like higher, so that you weren't looking at the road the whole time. Like when you were in the middle, you were kind of you were in this little green.
I didn't know that was part of
hug. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was just some planters and
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was really well done. And a lot of people used it. It was during the summer, so obviously, yeah. Right now, if we look outside, we wouldn't be using it, but a lot of nice sunny days, and people were really taking over it. And the fact that there were less cars coming through there anyway, because I should add that at the end of the street there was what they call a cut, and cars weren't allowed to go through, so that would also kind of decrease the traffic that was coming down that road anyway. So that was there were 3 kind of main changes to the road. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was really amazing. That road is so busy, and the fact that there are already less cars, the cars that are there are moving a lot slower. It's a lot quieter. You can hear the birds chirping again. I mean, it's really it's almost like there are a lot of streets in Amsterdam that are already like that. But taking such a big one where a lot of people are already coming and are kind of the last one on this hierarchy of cars, bicycles, people, from flipping that, putting cars back on top and putting putting people back on top and cars on the bottom. That was really, really incredible to see and to experience for 6 weeks.
I was trying to think of an analogy to maybe describe to the listeners who may have been in Amsterdam like a while back, but this street is what it felt like in front of Central Station before they shut off the traffic from there. So in front of the Central train station used to be like 4 lanes of traffic, right, with a median. And that's how this street that we're talking about with the street experiment really feels like. So if you were in Amsterdam like 10 years ago and you stepped out of Central Station and then just like seeing all that car traffic before you get to all the bikes, that was the demonstration for me for the first time. It's like, wow, is incredible. The
Mm-hmm.
capacity of Amsterdam, especially, to just go ahead and make that transformation.
Mm.
But that project, as an example, did not have really an experiment phase,
Mm.
right? And we were in a project meeting, extra project meeting, where the city of Amsterdam said that they don't really do experiments
Mm.
because, I mean, the city is very competent at implementing change, and they're very good,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so they know absolutely what they're doing, um, and it is so much better than most other places around the world, seeing final products of what they make. But uh, your role and my role too, right, is to look at these interventions with a critical eye.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you about street experiments. It's great when they come into existence and we're like, hurrah, it's happening for the first time. It's very exciting.
Mm.
But then we've both seen these street experiments go away in both Munich and Amsterdam, um, with no further follow up commitment for it to come back. So, what does your experience and your expertise in that area, how does that impact the way that you see these temporary changes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the big question. It's and a lot of places do it really differently. So in Amsterdam, like you said, they put it in, they see what happens with the traffic, how people reacted to it, they take it out, and then they go for a few months and they evaluate everything, and then they come back out with a plan to keep going. So it's very careful, you could
Mm-hmm.
say. But for instance, in London, where they've been doing a lot of low traffic neighborhoods, they know already that that works. And a woman there, a counselor there who's working in Islington, she said, we would put this in, but we would never take it out. Like we would put it in, we would make little small changes to see what would happen. But if we saw that it was working and it was bringing us the benefits that we were looking for, then we wouldn't rip it back out. That would be insanity. So it's it's always a really careful balance. Also, depends on which pieces you're going to tackle first. So the Weesperstraat is really a busy road, and people we saw in the media and everywhere that it was a very politically sensitive issue. That's why it took so long to actually get it put in the first place. So that makes it all much more difficult than just saying kind of black and white. Oh, we need a street experiment here, so we're going to do it, and if it works, we're gonna put it in. So it's not so straightforward as we might like, but of course we see some examples where that does work, and people see the benefits quite immediately, and then maybe the process moves a little bit quicker. But yeah, it also depends on the stance that the local government is taking towards these types of initiatives. Is it just for fun? Do they just have some money, some budget left over for these types of things? They give it to, well, in Munich we know they had some money for this, but other than that, very hands off. And that's not to say that the municipalities aren't doing their own things. Maybe street experiments aren't the way for them to go. Maybe they are not very well equipped, or they're not really sure how to do something like that. So they kind of give it out to universities or citizen groups to take over. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. And what I noticed the most in terms of your question about putting this in and then coming back is that without that kind of continuous support and the kind of longer term plan, like how does this fit into our goals? Are we actually going to learn from this thing? Or are we just doing it to kind of check a box and, okay, we had a cool experiment for 6 weeks and now we're going to go evaluate and see what happens. Unless you want to actually learn from it as the experiment organizer, or make it fit into your kind of larger plan, then what often happens is that these things just go away and they end up, those benches and those green mats get put in storage somewhere, and there's some nice pictures, but other than that, there's not really a follow-up or a legacy from what happened. So that's what we don't say we know exactly how you should do a tree experiment, and this is what you need to do, and if you do this, and it will work, because obviously there's a lot of different factors that you take into account. But I think one thing that we can say from what we've studied, at least our examples, is that learning from experiments, monitoring them, assessing them, seeing what they bring, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and then tying that into your bigger plan is where a lot of missteps happen. And if that wouldn't happen, then it might be more effective.
Yeah. Big, big items
Yeah.
to tackle.
Definitely.
So that really raises a question for me when you mentioned these things, these benches, these green grasses, they go into storage. Yeah, that's a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah, I do
Right?
have to say, I asked this question to the person who was in charge of the, well, not in charge, but knew about the Weesperstraat pilot, that they actually rented those benches, and the flowers were also rented or given to some other project or something. So it's not like it was. I was really curious, what are they going to do with all this? Because it was very nice benches, really nice material, everything like that. But apparently you can rent stuff like that, and then you don't have to put it in storage somewhere.
That sounds like a great business idea.
Right?
Like load up a few trucks and just
Yeah.
pop up experiments of a
Yeah.
city of your choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Be like the street experiments show every summer. Visit
Yeah.
a different city.
Yeah, but I do know in Munich, for instance, that there the people that were behind the project that you were talking about, the Steinhuber mini block, that they were really like, we don't have anywhere to put it,
Yeah.
and it's your project. So that's we funded it, we gave you the money to make it happen, but other than that, you need to figure out what you do afterwards and with all the stuff. So yeah, very different ways to approach it. But yeah, these are all things that at least I always kind of forgot. Like, oh yeah, it's there temporarily and then it goes away. So where does it go? Right?
Yeah. Where does it go? That's just the picture of these nice street furniture sitting in a dark room somewhere. It hurts a little bit because you see the reversion of the street back to what it used to be.
Yeah.
But you start to think, well, that didn't have to be temporary, right? And there's different ways that cities are going about trying to make these permanent. But seems like there's a few loud voices. You mentioned in the newspaper, Amsterdam, the street experiment really made it into the news, even though we don't think of changing road space as a newsworthy item usually, but it does anger people. It does hit people quite strongly. It does provoke a societal debate on what, if you think about it, it's just like a few hundred square meters of asphalt, right? So given that it's such a sensitive topic, what do you think, how do you think our politicians and societies can deal with feedback and respond to it appropriately without overvaluing the few angry voices, especially at the public meetings where city planners, get yelled at and such. So
so huge part of why these things work or don't work is because of resistance from particularly car owners, because what you're essentially doing is taking space from them, and you're saying, your way of moving around the city is no longer how we're going to do things. And that can be that can be really an emotional thing for a lot of people. And a big part of changing such a system like this is behavioral. So really changing how people use the street, and to change that is maybe the biggest thing. And you have to get people on board in order to eventually change your policies or to change the way that it looks. So how to deal with that? I think knowing that in the first place, like not being naive, going to it's like just know that there are going to be a lot of people probably that are not in favor of what you're doing, but also letting them slowly get used to the new situation is maybe one way to do it. I also know examples of where, for instance, in Ghent, where they introduced the traffic circulation plan, I think it was either 2017 or 2019, I'm not entirely sure, but around there, and also some experiments were happening on the side. But basically, from one day to the next, it was there. They just did it, which takes a lot of guts as a politician and as a city. And I think, yeah, you can do it that way. You can just say, hey, people, this is how it's going to be. Or you can go more the experiment, slow route, let people kind of get used to it. Go to the Weesperstraat, see, oh, actually, this is actually pretty nice. Like, oh, my journey to from A to B wasn't that much longer than I thought it was going to be, or that I was scared that I was going to be losing time, or I wouldn't be able to come to my house, or things like that. So a lot of it is the fear of the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen, and then letting people kind of ease into those changes. And I think it's hard for people that are kind of already there to maybe really understand how that might be for someone who drives a car every day and that's what they've done for the last 20 years. Like, to actually change that is really asking a lot of that person. So that shouldn't be underestimated, but also realize that some people don't actually have that choice. So taxi drivers or people that really need their car to go to work. I know a great example from the living streets in Ghent. Ghent is the cool city with all these cool with all these examples. But they wanted to put a living street in one street, and I talked to the woman from the municipality that was in charge of that, and she said there was this one man that was really angry. He was like one person that was totally against it, and everybody else was for. But there, they wouldn't just do it without getting that guy to go along with it. So what they do there is they really go to that guy's house. They talk to him for a very long time to find out what's kind of underlying this resistance to have that put in the street. And after some talks, they figured out that he was kind of like the local taxi driver for people in the neighborhood, older people who needed to go to a pharmacy or needed to go to the hospital or something like that. He had kind of taken on that unofficial role, and he was afraid that if they were going to close the street, then he wouldn't be able to do that anymore and to give that service to those people. And you would think, okay, why didn't you just say that from the get-go? But yeah, these things are so deep, and people are so afraid of the change that it's just kind of an instinctual reaction, I think, to just be like, no, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. And if you go and sit down and talk to them, which takes a ton of time, by the way, so yeah, obviously, if anyone's listening to this and is working at the municipality and thinks there's no way we could do that with every person and kind of tailor make these experiments or tailor make a situation to what everybody wants, of course not. But if you would go and you would find that out and you would maybe try to sit down and talk to those people and come up with some kind of solution to make it work, then you say, okay, yeah, if you do that, that's awesome. That's great for people. Then we will make sure that we have one parking spot at the end of the street for your car and for this kind of unofficial, healthcare taxi service from this old man. So that's one example. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to sound naive and think you could do this for every person who's living in this neighborhood or coming to you with some kind of complaint. So it's probably a really careful balance between having a very clear political stance and goal, saying this is where we want to go, but remaining open to maybe suggestions or other ways or viewpoints, and trying to find some kind of middle way to go forward. That's what I would think.
Yeah, and the urban planning profession. I'm teaching Intro to Planning 101 this
Nice.
semester to the bachelors who come in, and actually it is the introduction to urban planning course that you think about these big issues, right? Such as planning is a profession built around collective action, right? We're trying to solve social problems, problems around public space, problems around communities, and really it's the market that solves these individual problems. So of course, thinking it from that perspective, it's like, of course, we're going to get a few angry voices, but and part of the work that you do is you collect lots of data around how street experiments are doing. So yes, collecting the opposition, but also collecting also the other 300 residents who are not speaking out, right? And trying to get as much data from them as possible. So when you get the perspective of the whole community and have a data set and have the numbers there of, okay, so out of 300 people in the neighborhood, we have 5 people against, and let's say like 100 that are really for this, but they don't speak up because, you know, when you have an experiment, you're like, oh, this is cool. This is here. This is great. That doesn't provoke as much the positive aspect of enjoying a space doesn't provoke as much negative outrage. It doesn't provoke as much action as a negative outrage of a few people losing their parking spaces,
Yeah.
right? So, so the benefits are distributed relatively evenly, but the downsides are borne by a few people. In this case of your story, it's borne by this one taxi driver, right? And that then motivates that one person to stir the pot a lot more than all the people who on average are benefiting.
Yeah.
So could you talk a bit about the data collection part and whether or not you think that's useful, like politically, like does showing people and the politicians or the people who are responsible for making street change, do they value the data part as highly as perhaps you would like as an academic?
Yeah. So I think yes, a lot of the places that makes it official, right? That makes it legitimate. If you say yes, we did consultation, we had a survey. Great, you've got numbers, you've got percentages where you can say people were happy with it, or we had this much decrease in cars and this much increase in cycling. So that really helps your case if you need to sell this and convince people. But what I do see is what I said, and we kind of know this like from our profession, is that doing consultation, doing participation, it's very intensive, hard work. There's not always the resources that you need in order to do that and also do that properly. And like I said, going and talking to people and asking them what they think about it, that could either be really great or that could turn into a disaster. So it's definitely context dependent and definitely just depends on what's the climate at the moment. How are people feeling about this? I mean, I also know examples in London where they put in a low traffic neighborhood in one neighborhood right next to the neighborhood where 80% of it is already one big low traffic neighborhood. And then the other one, they actually put it in, made it permanent. The the local council changed and they are planning to rip it back out. So it just depends, and that's because a lot of people were really against it, and for them, that the car was kind of a status symbol and very important to them to have, and it just went right back the other way. So yeah, I'm not sure. I find it a tricky balance again between. Of course, you have to do it, obviously. But like I said before, knowing where we're going, that's why we have politicians. That's why we have decision makers to kind of set the course. But remaining open to maybe there's something about this plan that we have that's not totally inclusive, or it's not exactly the way it should be, or it's not matching what people actually want outside. So yeah, but this is a big question that if anyone out there who's an urban planner or studies these things knows the answer to, then yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, and I like to make data just as exciting as
Yeah.
angry comments on Twitter.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, which also weigh a lot. I mean, and they also sway people in one direction or another. So that's what happened in London with the low traffic neighborhoods. I don't know if you saw the Guardian article about the traffic wars. I mean, it was really a big deal there, and it looked like half were for, half were against. Some places that was the case, but like you said, there were 4 or 5 angry voices against it, and then there were 4 or 5 voices totally for it, and then a lot of people didn't even know that it was there. That was that's what I heard from someone that was who was organizing these things, and a lot of people just are kind of in this middle and can go either way. So yeah, it's important to be aware of that as well, that it's not necessarily the majority that's saying these things. But I also want to add, um, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, we can come back to it.
Yeah, because it was a good thing to say, but again,
Yeah. I'll come back to you.
yeah.
So I was wondering, as as someone who's been around a few places in the world, and you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Mm-hmm.
right? What what gives you hope for our ability to change the way that streets are built and the way that streets are legally provisioned for everyone?
Mm. Um.
You're
Well,
optimistic? Are you has like do we live in a bubble? Is this whole EU project kind of a bubble? I was just wondering, what
yeah. It depends
what's your
on
optimism needle?
my optimism level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I saw the prime minister's message from the UK about how he's in favor of car drivers' rights. And then I feel like we're back in the 1950s or something. But so this morning, less optimistic. But yeah, where we live, yeah, obviously, I think it takes time. That's the case with any kind of change. It's going to take time, but I think eventually, I'm hopeful that it will go to a more balanced system. And with that, I mean more balance between the different types of modes. But it also depends on where you are and what the need is. I mean, I think a lot of people in Amsterdam would already say, "What? We don't need to change anything. It's already great here." I mean, like there's so many ways to get around. We have this amazing cycling infrastructure. Like, why would we? What else is there to actually change? So yeah, it's also that being aware of the situation you're already in and realizing it. Okay, we have it pretty good already, and then realizing also that someone in a small town in Kentucky is not worried about these kind of things because it's just not really an issue there. I mean, it's it's even too far, you could say, to for me to have gone from my house to school on a bike. Even if there was an amazing cycling path, that would have taken like 20 minutes. I mean, the distances are so much more spread out. The Everything is built in such a different way. So I don't really think you can compare those two things. And then you could say, okay, there it's not really a necessity as it is maybe in a very busy city.
That is a wonderful train of thought. I did not understand the urban rural divide because I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, and until I took a road trip across Canada, across the U.S., and I visited some friends, and they lived on a farm, and we had like 12-year-old kids driving pickup trucks because it's their farm. You don't need a license.
Yeah.
And I was like sitting on the tailgate, going
Yeah.
to see some cows, and just a completely different set of political issues that's relevant, right? So that comment just made me realize, yeah, like it's not really a part of everyday consideration if you're from a non-urban or very car immersed context, right?
Yeah.
So but I think it also is positive in the way that our audience is limited
Mm.
because we can then just speak to the subset who are thinking about these issues,
Yeah.
and it doesn't it, and um, I don't have to be against uh, I don't have to be against the way that things are done for another group politically who don't really interact with urban issues, right? So, for example, farmers who are living out in the middle of nowhere, cycling is not feasible. So there is a reason, perhaps, bring this back to the beginning of the podcast where you emphasize that this is a urban, you said city street experiments,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
City street experiments. And it is for a particular audience set. And I think the city is interesting because it is a particular way of making space valuable, right? Urbanization is a process, and gentrification. It's a process of making space more valuable than it was. And through that process, it becomes more contested because it is more valuable.
Yeah.
And urban planners, city planners, right? Our job is to figure out how to resolve these conflicts that inevitably arise. Conflicts that don't exist in a rural setting where your neighbor is like a kilometer down the road, right?
Exactly.
You just want to make sure your road gets plowed.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I remembered what I was going to say.
Yes, perfect.
So about the group, like I said, it takes a long time to change something. And what I'm interested in, what I haven't actually had the chance to research in my PhD, because there were tons of other questions, but this is one that's popped up along the way, is how do those people who are against it in the beginning, does anyone go back and actually check to see how they feel about it maybe a year later, or okay, 6 weeks is quite short. But those low traffic neighborhoods in London, they were implemented. They're not taken out for the most part. And I wonder if those voices in the beginning that were very against it, if they are still so against it, or if after having the time to adjust, which is kind of the point of this whole experiment thing, if they've now changed their minds. I would be really, really curious to see. And of course, that's harder to do from a research perspective because you have to do a longitudinal study then and really take.
I got a similar one for you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, congestion pricing.
Oh.
Have you heard about the story of, I think it's Stockholm, because Stockholm is a city connected by bridges, right?
Yeah.
So when they implemented congestion pricing for the bridges, like there was like 90% opposition or something, just overwhelming opposition. It's like taking away a parking spot. It's probably like it's probably the same nerve, paying to get anywhere, and also the idea of losing your parking space.
Yeah.
Like, I think it hits the same space in the way that we think. So I would mention that because in the case of congestion pricing, people were super against at the beginning, but then a year later they were surveyed again, and it turned out that a lot of the people who were super against, now it was like a non-issue, right? I think that's the thing. It's not that it's becoming supported.
Yeah, but it's not a problem anymore.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, like it just fades into the background.
And did they actually measure that? So they looked at how people felt before and then asked them again how they felt
Yeah, that
after,
was a
or-
longitudinal
yeah.
study. I mentioned it because maybe we could do a similar thing for, maybe the similar process happens for street experiments, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would be super curious to see, because that's the whole question of, is behavioral change actually happening? And are people, okay, they're forced to then change
Yeah.
their behavior, but how do they feel about it? That's a totally another dimension that, at least up until now, I haven't really seen anyone focus on that. So really the behavioral side of these changes and this whole experiment thing, that's something that I would be interested in looking at further.
Yeah. I hope it's something like that.
Yeah.
That the opposition diminishes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I got for today. I'm very glad you were able to join.
Thank you for having me.
And very glad that we're able to find this space. This is quite the
Yeah.
cool space that we're in today with all the
Thank you, Teaching and Learning Center.
Teaching Learning Center at the University of Amsterdam. Thanks for camera operator doing all the behind the scenes work, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and having the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah. So this is episode 4.
episode 4. Great. Thank
We'll
you.
keep it going.
Subscribe.
Subscribe. Thank you, Katherine VanHoose.
Yeah.
And good luck
Thanks,
on the rest of
George.
your PhD.
Yeah, thank you.